Hello and welcome to the Game On podcast. My name is Adam Bellow. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Breakout EDU, but I'm also a father, a serial ed tech entrepreneur, and an advocate for positive change in the classroom. Each episode of the Game On podcast is going to feature a new voice from someone who's making an amazing impact and helping to pave the way of the future of education. All right, welcome to the Game On podcast. I'm your host, Adam Bellow, and I'm really excited to be joined here by an incredible pioneer in the world of educational and just computer gaming, Al Lowe. So Al, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome.
So is that a way to say that I'm really old?
Oh, well, I'm pretty old. So if you're really old, I don't know. It's it's wonderful to have this opportunity to kind of talk to people that are not only inspiring, but also have just helped pave a path to what we do here at Breakout. So it means a great deal for you to come in and share a little bit with our audience. So thank you.
It is my pleasure to speak with you today.
Well, awesome. So, how would you introduce yourself? Like, what's your elevator pitch to kind of who you are, or what you've been doing?
I guess I was an early programmer, designer, writer of adventure games. I particularly liked adventure games because that's what I started playing, and I was pretty good at it. I didn't like Twitch games and action games and things because I suck. And so my focus went to adventure games, and I started by convincing my wife that we should spend a full month of our combined incomes to buy an Apple II Plus with 48K of memory, 2 floppy drives, and a 9-inch green screen monitor.
Wow.
That was how much money it cost back then. It was
That's unbelievable.
And I convinced her that if she let me buy this thing, that I would somehow figure out a way to make it pay for itself.
Hey, where there's a will, there's a way. And so you mentioned spending your salaries. What I know, and I don't think the audience knows yet, what was your job at the time?
My wife and I were both school district music coordinators. She handled vocal music. I handled instrumental music for a fairly large school district in Central California.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I mean, it's
what else could a guy do who was a proto nerd? I was geeky when I was in grade school. I was the kid who jumped up to fix the film projector when it jammed. I was the guy who soldered the microphone cables when they went bad. I'm the guy that built the speakers for my band and all that stuff. I was into electronics. I built a Dynakit stereo amplifier and preamplifier because a Heathkit was too common. I went for the high end.
That's very, very cool. So you mentioned games that you didn't like, and so that's what brought you to designing games. But, my level 1 question for you, play is super important to us here at Breakout. So I always like to ask people what games they played when they were kids, and then what games they're playing now. So obviously I know that there's a large period where you spent time creating the games, but what do you remember playing as a youngster?
Well, all we had when I was young was rocks and dirt. No, let's see. My family was big on Monopoly. We played a lot of board games. We played a lot of card games. Canasta. Who's heard of that? Nobody knows that game.
My mom plays that. She's a retired woman.
It's a mom game. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And that was one of the things we played. So, no video games or anything. I remember the first time I saw Pong, I was a grown man. I don't know, I was 35 or something, and saw this and said, "My God, this is amazing! Look at what you can do with computers."
It is incredible, and we'll get to some of the things you built with computers in just a second. But before we jump into that, what do you play now? So now that you're not making games actively anymore, what do you still play games? You play on your phone? You play on the computer?
The only thing I play is on my phone. I play backgammon.
Okay.
And Free Cell. I love
Awesome.
Free Cell, but I do it. I do speed Free Cell.
Okay.
So I can't quit until I solve the free cell in under 90 seconds.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
pretty
so
impressive.
I'll play 2 or 3 or 4 games before I can finally get one under 90 seconds. But that's my goal. Is to,
That's awesome.
no adventure games, no video games to speak of. We don't own a console anymore. Yeah, so
That's awesome.
I'm a terrible example of.
Well, listen, I mean, you spent so much of your life and career building these amazing games that I remember very fondly, and I'm sure a lot of our
It's
listeners do too.
interesting in that I was fascinated by games before I got into the business, and when I got into it and was making games myself, I played a lot of games, but it was always market research. It wasn't enjoyment. It wasn't play for pleasure, or it was, oh, how do they do that? Or oh, I see. Oh, I could steal that idea. There's an idea I'd use. And that kind of thing. It was all market research, and then and once you know how the sausage is made, you're not as interested in making
And eating
sausage.
it. Yeah. All right. Well, that makes sense. I don't think we actually got into some of the things you did get to create. So I'd love if you don't mind, like kind of, once you started creating your own games, we talked right before we started recording, talked about Black Cauldron, and then obviously working your way up, obviously as the creator. We didn't say this yet, but Al is most famously, I think, the creator of the Leisure Suit Larry game series that
Guilty.
was put out at Sierra, which is amazing. But also one of the games that I love to talk about internally at Breakout with our team, we talk about all the time, an educational game I remember playing as a kid when I was 5 or 6 called Donald Duck's Playground. So I'm sure there's a lot of stepping stones in between. So if you want to kind of take us on the little journey.
I was very proud of Donald Duck's Playground. There was a weird thing happened in 1982. Disney had authorized Texas Instruments to be the exclusive user of their characters. TI paid a lot of money to Disney and said, we want exclusive rights to the Disney characters. They also paid a lot of money to Mattel, Barbie, and all those products, and some other companies too. I mean, it was a big. They wanted to buy their way into the home market with their big Texas Instrument 99, the TI 99 computer. Well, people saw the TI 99, and it was pretty pricey, and it didn't do much, and it didn't have a lot of support. And finally, in one day in the fall of 1982, they decided to get out of the business, and they just stopped making computers, and they stopped making software, and they said, we quit. We're just out. Ken Williams, who's the founder and CEO of Sierra, knew somebody at TI and called him up and said, what's going on with that software? And he said, well, I think the rights are available. If you want to buy them, they could probably get them cheap. And because we signed this horrible deal with Disney where we do all the work and they get all the money. And Ken said, oh, that sounds good to me. So he ended up buying the rights from TI. And so for about 2 or 3 years, we were Walt Disney Software. Nobody knew it particularly, but I designed the Donald Duck's Playground game. I designed Winnie the Pooh in the 100 Acre Wood, which I was very proud of. It won a lot of awards. And I wrote the music for Donald Duck, for Mickey Mouse's Space Adventure. And there were other games as well. So we put out several games with this. But what happened was after we sold them for a long time, we realized they don't sell any better than the games that we make up ourselves about our own characters. And our games, we get to keep all the money. And Disney's games, we get a little fraction and they get all the rest. And so Ken said, we'll just give this up. We'll go back to making games ourselves. And that's when the games Space Quest and Police Quest and Larry and Laura Bow, all those, Quest for Glory, all those games came out right after we gave up the Disney characters.
Yeah, what a fascinating story. And I actually mentioned to a friend of mine, I was like, "Oh, you'll never guess who I'm interviewing for the podcast." And he literally said to me when I mentioned that you had created the Donald Duck game, he literally said, "Oh, I remember catching watermelons." So here we are, literally almost 40 years removed from it, and people remember it really well. So my team's probably sick of me talking to, and I'm talking to people that are much younger than I am, and I'm talking about this game, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, I send people screenshots. There's a video on YouTube. I reference it quite a lot, so I thank you both as a kid playing it, but also as creative inspiration for some of the stuff we're working on now here at Breakout.
Well, you're welcome.
Um,
It won adventure. It won an educational game of the year from several
it's
publications.
a great game. I mean, for those that haven't played it, there's multiple mini puzzles, and then the goal is that Donald Duck is doing these different tasks and earns money at each task and can go buy parts of his playground, and then walks across the street, builds a playground. I mean, it is a brilliant, simple construct, but something that today falls into all these other games where people are doing the same thing. There's mini games and a grand purpose. It's
I
awesome.
was proud of the idea that you would when you won the games, you spent your money altruistically by
Yep.
giving your nephews a present. I don't know that was ever mentioned in any of the reviews or anything, but I thought, well, that's a nice way to teach people to share. Anyway,
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. And you're also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my other favorite games. I'm sure, I mean, obviously it pales in terms of Larry's fame, but I remember playing Freddie Farkas' Frontier Pharmacist quite a bit when I was a kid as well. So,
yeah,
you know, so many titles you've been
I
involved in.
love that game. Did you play it with sound
I
with the
did. I did.
voices?
It was a
Yeah,
CD-ROM, I think. I mean,
that's the best way because we put out a silent version first,
oh, okay.
right when CD-ROMs were catching on. When they
Mm-hmm.
started, we put out the silent version, and I said we've got to make this game talk. It's got to be a talkie. So if you
That's
get a
awesome.
chance, go find the talk. You can probably download it anywhere now.
I would imagine.
I wouldn't encourage people to pirate software, but
I think you could probably buy it on GOG or Steam or
you
somewhere, I
should
would
be able
imagine.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And of course, they should send me a nickel or a
I would
dime or
hope so.
something.
Yeah, I was
No,
going to
no,
say.
no, no. I get zero. I get nothing.
Well, that whole Sierra issue is another, I'm sure, another story for.
Yeah, that the business story is ugly in extreme. But
Yeah.
you could learn about that if you buy Ken Williams' book. What's the title of it?
I think
Uh,
it's all fairy
Not
tales have
all
happy
fairy
endings. Not all
tales.
fairy tales have happy endings.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, which we actually read as a team. We have a book club. A couple of us participate in, so that was
Yeah.
one that we recommended, and we read that a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So
It's a
yeah.
good book.
Well, awesome. So let's get back to you and kind of your. We went through a little bit of your origin story with being a music teacher, and then convincing your wife to get a computer. Which again, this sounds like very kindred spirits. It sounds like something I would very much do and be like, I promise, we'll figure out a way to make it work.
There was a lot of that going on back then.
Yeah, I would imagine, but it certainly did. So I'd love to talk about kind of our level 3 question. We'll skip over level 2 because we kind of captured that already. But our level 3 question here is about challenges. So if you could share kind of one of the biggest challenges or obstacles that you had to overcome in your journey to kind of reach at any point to find the success that you found. So maybe it's a programming issue, maybe it's something just, anything that was a challenge at the time that you were able to overcome.
In the early years, the market was shifting so rapidly that there was a period in the early 80s when every project I did, I either had to learn a new computer or a new language or a new operating system or multiples of the above. We were constantly changing. We were moving from platform to platform. I started on an Apple II, but we quickly realized that COM64 was where all the money was, that we should start selling 64 games. So one of the guys at Sierra figured out a cartridge. He figured out a way that this is pretty geeky. I'm going to get geeky here for a second.
Go for it.
He figured out a way that you could plug in an 8-pin chip adapter into the joystick port. Back then, Apple joysticks literally ended in 8 little
Yep.
spider pin sticking out, and you had to plug that into the port. Okay, so he figured out if he plugged in a wire to that port, then he could jiggle those wires. And at the other end of the wire, he had a cartridge that went into the COM64. So I would run the program that was on this cartridge on the Commodore, and I would run the send program that he wrote on the Apple, and I would transfer an entire program through that wire from one machine to the other.
Wow.
So I did all my work on the Apple, compiled it, assembled it, and then transferred it over, and then I could test it on the Commodore. So
That's
it was,
unbelievable.
yeah, Bob Heitman was his name. He was a genius. I
That
admire
sounds
him so much.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing. So that's definitely a challenge to have overcome. And
that was a real challenge.
so, I mean, this is just off the cuff. How many machines did you guys write for? Because obviously I know I played most of the games on PC and 64.
I used to get a spreadsheet that said, you sold this many copies of Winnie the Pooh in the 100-Acre Wood for the Apple II, and you sold this many copies for the Commodore 64, and you sold this many for the VIC-20, and you sold this many for the Apple II GS, and you sold this many for the IBM PC, and it was just Atari 400 and 800 were different machines. Radio Shack, TRS-80s.
Yeah.
The Coco color computer was a different product. So I had a spreadsheet full of list of computers that, and I got a notice every month that said you sold this many copies of this on this machine, and yeah, it was a lot of machines. We supported a lot of stuff. And we also supported IBM PCs that didn't have graphics cards or that had monochrome graphics cards.
Okay.
Because when PCs first came out, they had just text. And then if you were a rich businessman, you would buy a Hercules monochrome graphics card and hook it up to your TV. And then you would get this horrible single monotone, but you could have graphics. And you convinced your wife that you would use it for spreadsheets, but what you really did was play games.
That's awesome.
Ugly games. But,
I remember the early days. That's funny.
Then the CGA cards came out, and they had a whopping 4 colors, which was more than anybody needed.
I tell my kids about this, and I get the typical eye roll and the comment of, "Oh, back in my day," you know. But I walk up through. I'm like, there was CGA, EGA, VGA, SVGA, XGA. I'm like, they don't even understand now. It's like, you download.
And I had to buy each one of those cards.
That's right.
It didn't come in the machine. I bought the first EGA card I bought was $600.
Wow.
Just for the damn card.
Just for the
card.
card.
That was in old money. That was 1980s money,
That's unbelievable. Yeah. It's really funny to think how far things have come. I remember I begged my parents for a CD-ROM. We saved for 2 years to get a CD-ROM. I got one when I was a teenager, and that's, the games like Freddy Farkas and Phantasmagoria and other things that had all that animation and video.
The first CD reader I got was $600. And then the CD burners came out. Yep.
And you had to get a Sound Blaster card too on top of it, mini card or whatever.
The CD burner, the first one that Ken bought was $50,000, and it mostly made coasters. Almost always, it would not do something wrong, and you'd throw it away. But it was $50,000 for the first box, and
that's
then
amazing.
I bought one when it got down to $1,200, I think it was. So it was it was an expensive time.
It really was. And obviously, there's so many things that you learned along the way, especially not having been trained, like I relate to that story. A lot of the folks on my team were educators that kind of fell into this educational technology business. And, so I was an English teacher by trade and then kept on doing different roles. And my co-founders and a lot of the folks here have been doing different roles as well. So you kind of self-taught yourself all of these things along the way, which is unbelievable. Level 5 question, our last like official question over here is, what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career journey? And then the second part of that is, what's a piece of advice you would give anybody listening?
Well, the best advice I got was I learned to program in AppleSoft Basic, and I produced games that worked. And when I sold them to Sierra, Ken Williams said, well, you can't sell a game that's written in BASIC. You have to rewrite those in assembly language. And I said, well, okay, well, all right. So I bought an assembler and I did a bunch of stuff, and I took all the code and turned it into assembly language, and it ran exactly the same. There was, there was nothing in the code that was slowing it down in BASIC, but his lesson was learn the computer, learn assembly language, learn how the inside of the machine works, what you can do by manipulating bits and nibbles instead of bytes, and so forth. And that was important, and that came into play later on. We did some things in adventure games that people didn't think we could do because we used that. And then later, when I fell out of retirement the first time, I ended up using that same skill set there. So I would say that's a good idea. Learn as much as you can inside the belly of the beast. Get down inside and don't live at the high level. And the best advice I can give somebody would be, it's harder than you think. And if you're good at it, it takes more time and more care and concern to make a good product.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's clear that there's so much that you've been able to accomplish, and obviously there's a lot of just hearing you talk about, reminiscing about the things you learned along the way. I can only imagine the pride that you have thinking back on how hard those problems must have been. So it's great. It's great advice to hear from someone that's lived it and done it. My question, completely going back to kind of your large library of things you've worked on. What's your favorite project? Is there a particular game, either one of a series or just a game that you worked on that was your personal favorite?
I was very pleased with a game that doesn't get much recognition called Torrens Passage. It's probably not high on your list.
I remember Torrens Passage.
But
I remember it though.
I had been writing Larry games, and my kids were 13 and 7, I guess, something like that, 14 and 7. And I didn't really let them play Larry, it just didn't seem apropos. And so I thought, Ken said, I'd like to have a game that we could sell in the opposite Christmas from King's Quest, because King's Quest was a big seller, but it took 2 years to do a game. And so he had nothing to sell on these odd numbered Christmases. And he said, can you do a family game for those years? And I said, yeah, sure. So I created a 5-game outline of what would this guy's life and what would happen to him. And, concluding with his death in the 5th game. And he approved it, liked it. And we created a world that gave lots and lots of possibilities. Physically impossible, but artistically and literally impossible, but made good literature, I guess. Anyway, that was Torrens Passage. So I'm particularly proud of that because it's a game that I wrote which didn't catch on. It's a genre that nobody else really followed. It was written so that an adult could play it with a child, and both of them would laugh at different times. And I got the idea because I took my family to see Mrs. Doubtfire. And when Robin Williams would say something funny, there were 2 pitches of laughter. There was one where he'd do something slapstick or silly, catch his boobs on fire or whatever. And all the kids would leave. There was this high-pitched titter of laughter. And then when he would do some double entendre that the kids didn't get, you could hear all the adults go, oh, 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 oh. There was a Lowe. And I thought, why aren't there games like that? Why can't I play a game with a kid
Yeah.
and both of us have fun? And that was my goal for that game. So if you play it with a child, and I think you'll
That's
both
awesome.
enjoy it.
That's very, very cool. Yeah, I feel like that's the secret sauce they hit with those Pixar movies and the Shrek movies and stuff, where there's 2 levels of viewership.
Yeah. I think they learned that from me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Of course, they played Torrance Passage, and
Actually,
therefore they knew.
before I did that title, I did a study of Disney films. I went through all the ones I could rent. VHS. Remember that? I went through all the ones I could rent and took notes as to how it worked. And so I included a sidekick that he could talk to. I included an evil person, that was the villain, and I just like all the things that I found from the Disney films. I tried to insert in there, not steal, but just the same concept. You use the same idea.
It's a concept. I love it. I love it. And listen, that's how people pay homage. And I think you took it into a different genre. And I, for one, again, am just eternally grateful, because I think that it's given both. I really genuinely have enjoyed playing the games you created, and get to now 30, 40 years later, get to work at a company where that's the focus of what we do, is to make these types of games for kids for learning.
Good.
So,
and with Larry, they'll learn something else.
That's true. It's everything's a learning opportunity for sure. Well, Al, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time and sharing with us a little today. Other than your website, is there anything that you want folks to know about you, or anything they should follow you online or anything like that?
24 years, every morning I've sent out 2 jokes in an email. One of the jokes is clean. So if you want to subscribe to my email list, my joke list, it's free, and I don't sell your name or do anything with it. I'm too lazy for that. It's just I collected a lot of jokes, and now I'm still collecting jokes. I'm up. I think I've sent out 11,000 jokes, all unique. I never duplicate. I don't. If I get a duplicate one, I don't send it out. So yeah. So.
That's amazing. I see a book.
It would be 1,000 pages probably. I set it up once as a book, and it was 700 pages, but that was a long time ago. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Huh. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing the laughs, and thanks for sharing all the information. It was really great to get to chat. Until the next time, everyone, game on.